Welcome. I'm Etiony Aldarondo from the Melissa Institute, and I have the pleasure and the distinct honor today to introduce you to Miss Mary Gordon. Uh, Mary is will be um, leading a Melissa Institute online course on February 19th on building empathy, the missing piece in violence prevention. Uh, Let me tell you a little bit about Mary, and not too much, just a little bit about her background. And Mary is an award-winning social entrepreneur, educator, author, parenting expert, and child advocate who has created an international children's charity called Roots of Empathy. I wanted to start, Mary, with asking you, what interested you in the study and promotion of empathy? Why empathy? How did you get there?
Yes. Well, first of all, hello, Etiony, and I'm absolutely charmed to be with you today and getting to know a little bit more about you as well. So, I guess empathy has always been a central piece of how I've seen the world, and I think it started in childhood. My mother used to welcome prisoners who got out of jail at our home for their first meal. And whatever time it was, there was a card table ready to set up. And my mother also influenced me by taking me to visit homes where people were living in dire circumstances, where they didn't have
Mhm.
enough food, their housing was woefully inadequate, and they had no coal. Imagine in those days, I'm that old, that they had coal as the main way of heating. And this was in Newfoundland, where I grew up. But the point that I guess the empathy point, my mother used to always say, we are a step away from the circumstances of the people whose homes we're going to visit and help, and that we are the same and we need to look at their lives through the same lens that we look at our own lives. So the valuing of empathy in my home was pretty high. And then I realized in the first enterprise that I started that there was a lot of violence in the families with whom I was working. And my big discovery was that there were no monsters. There were sad, broken people who were hurting the people they loved, and they
Mhm.
had no empathy.
Mhm.
And that was the missing ingredient that was stretched across all that pain and suffering. Was it the
Mhm.
perpetrators of this abuse, whether it was spousal abuse or child abuse or gratuitous, societal abuse? Missing was empathy. So I figured out, okay, if empathy is the missing piece in the violence, where does it come from? And I had always believed that we are predisposed, born into empathy. And from working with all the families and all the parents and little babies that I had worked with, I really believed that although we're born with the capacity for empathy, that it was in that first year of life, in the loving attachment relationship between parent and baby, that it either blossomed or faded. So I put these two things together, that empathy was a missing piece in violence, and that empathy grew in the attachment relationship and created the program Roots of Empathy. So that has been the big influence in my life and in creating Roots of Empathy, but it doesn't stop there. And I will stop there because I could go on for a long time. But I just want to say that, I mean, now I'm discussing empathy in leadership, I'm discussing empathy in the corporate world, discussing empathy in all kinds of situations. So it's no accident that I ended up connecting with you over
Mhm.
empathy.
So for you, empathy is on the one hand, is almost like a family tradition. It's a legacy, so to speak,
Mm,
a beautiful legacy that you get from your mom, and it's a commitment and a framework for action. So
mhm.
you you are not just you are living the empathy. You know,
Empathy is a verb.
it's a verb exactly. And
Mm,
so it's a commitment to act in a particular way, and
I think so. Yeah.
I remember that we did talk about that before, but that that your story reminded me about my mom used to do those has similar experiences that um, she would counsel and help just as a social worker
Mm.
drug addicted individuals, and she would get to the most difficult parts of town in Puerto Rico, uh, and the police wouldn't go there, but she would go there and she
Underwood.
win. They would wait for her, and they would really. It was phenomenal how much she could express, spread the love and the
Yeah.
to help those folks. So when you talk about that, I'm reminded of the first conversation that we had that you evoked that same sense, that recollection of my life. But we don't really spend enough time thinking about empathy, I think. It's one of those things is like water and oxygen, it's like there and we don't really, we ignore it. Don't you think?
Well, I think we take it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people who are empathic seek people out who are also empathic.
Right,
And because it's very comfortable, you're not disappointed all the time that
right.
people, people have been able to get you, as one child said, to understand you and to connect with you. So, yes, I think although it was never formally stated,
Mm-hmm.
um, I always grew up like you with an example of living with the challenges of the disadvantaged in whatever
Mm-hmm.
way their adversity was, that you were um, humble enough to be one with anybody, regardless if they were just getting out of jail that way. You could share a meal because your humanity is the same. Their circumstances are less fortunate than yours. And it's, as my mother would say to me, don't fool yourself, Missy Moo. You landed lucky.
Uh-huh. Right, right.
So it wasn't because of anything I had done that I had a loving and easy life. I
Uh-huh.
had a childhood that was uneventful with negative things and that was remarkable with quiet, moment to moment endorsements. And not everybody lands as lucky as my mother would say, as I did. Now, it wasn't about money because my father gave it all away. Um, we had enough to get by on for sure, but we certainly didn't live commensurate to the salary that my dad made
Mm-hmm.
because he felt as long as a family has enough to live by comfortably, they should share the rest. So, for instance, the my sister and I didn't have party shoes. And other little girls had party shoes. These are the old days. You didn't go to a birthday party in your running shoes like my kids or their kids do. So um, we didn't really want for anything. We had powdered milk instead of whole milk
Mm-hmm.
because there's some kids who had no milk. So there was a very strong um, connection to you and children on other continents that you could only point to on a globe, but you realized that your happiness was dependent on your sharing, that you couldn't hold on to a whole lot of things you didn't need when there was some little girl in Bangalore who had no shoes. So I think it was a privilege to grow up like that. Um, even though I never had a new party dress, I always had a passed down party dress.
Did you say that you never had a party dress?
Not a new party dress. Yes, I had party dresses, but they were all passed down. They were
Okay.
perfectly fine. There was nothing
Yeah.
wrong with them, right?
Yeah.
But little girls mark that. They notice. And it's just
Right.
so happened that I was the younger one.
Okay.
So in all the family, there were only two little girls. So this was a normal thing. But, when you say, what are the examples in your life, which is by accident,
Right.
that helped you know that empathy was the core of whatever you would do wherever you did it?
Yeah.
And that was the accident of birth, the luck of the draw.
So 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 you on the one hand you also so you were born you landed in an empathically supportive environment, okay, and
Yeah,
so did I, and
there you go.
so did I, and I'm grateful for that as well as I know you are for having landed there, and so how then did you make the jump to say, okay, I landed here, but we can take others there? What what moved you in that direction?
Well, I don't think it was conscious initially.
Okay. Hmm.
When I was a teenager in high school, I used to visit the women who were in prison. They were in, I guess, Elizabeth Fry ran, I guess, a halfway house or
Yes.
a residence. And I used to go after school, and I never told anybody because I thought I'd be forbidden to do it. But
Okay.
I would go because I felt their lives had to have been so lonely, and because they were shunned by society,
Hmm.
I was somehow aware of that. I'm not sure why, but it was an opportunity for me to see there, but for fortune, that these women were no different from me as a young teenager.
Hmm.
And I went by accident. I was in many people's homes. I was the first female newspaper carrier. You have to understand I'm ancient. So when I was a little girl in Newfoundland, which is the furthest most point of North America out of Canada, the gender roles were pretty straight. And girls were not paper boys. There wasn't even a name for paper carrier, it was paper boys. And because I delivered papers after school 2 days a week, people in the wintertime, everybody asked me in. And they'd say, "Come in, Ducky, and have a cup of tea," or "Come in, and Ducky, I'll give you a cookie," or "I just made some bread. You want some bread and molasses?" And people were amazingly kind. They'd be sending out search parties for me at home because it would take so long.
Yeah.
But what I got to see was the humility and generosity of the people
Yeah.
who didn't live particularly well, you know?
Yeah.
And I think I was very influenced by the Lovin family and not just my own, but all these families that I would visit
Yeah.
when I deliver their paper. And so I had many, many opportunities to be in homes. And even when I started teaching kindergarten, I sent out a letter to the parents. I was very young and really naive. And I said the letter to the parents, "I have a fancy education, but I really need your help because I don't know what I'm doing." The next day, they were all there
Uh-huh.
and concerned about who is this crazy young woman who's got our children. So, what I said to them was that I believe that I'm just borrowing your children, and that love is how children learn. And if you can invite me home for lunch, I'll bring my own peanut butter sandwich, but then you can get to know me and I can get to know your little one, and I'll be able to do a better job, and you can tell me how I'm doing and I'll tell you how they're doing. So it was a remarkable journey
Wow.
of learning for me. And again, the power of empathy. And quite honestly, I wasn't seeing it as empathy in those days.
Hmm.
I was seeing it as, why didn't they teach us this in university?
Right.
Or why don't I know? I knew from my mother, always have a chance to look in the fridge, see if there's any food. So I could see in the families of the children I was teaching if there was real poverty, if there was, an incontinent granny in the corner. What were the other problems that this little child I was teaching was living with? And very often the parents, and I was really young and stupid, but the parents trusted me because I trusted them. And they would tell me things. Suddenly I'm hearing about domestic violence, which was a new story for me. And suddenly I'm hearing about divorce, and I'm hearing about debt, and I'm hearing about a landlord who's abusive, and I'm hearing about all these things that I'd never heard of. So I think trust is such a precious commodity in relationships. And I learned by being vulnerable that people trusted me. And of course, I trusted them back. And I can tell you, I learned pretty well everything I know in people's kitchens. my own kitchen and other people's kitchens, not in university. No offense to the
Right,
university
right.
education, but it didn't really influence my life at all. You know, it was really people's genuine lived experience and the incredible love that parents have for their children. I could see it. You never appreciate the love you have in your own family when you're a child, but my golly, here I was at 21 seeing incredible sacrifice, incredible dedication, and suffering. You know, people who were really suffering. So that, I have to say, was my true learning, and that's why I left the classroom. I started up what I called parenting and family literacy centers for people to help them to come with their children before the children went to school, so you could share with the parents what are the things that will be helpful for your children to understand. And I don't mean the alphabet or AB, you know, numbers, but about getting along with others and all of those things that are middle class sort of purview.
Right.
So, yeah.
But you know, it's interesting because the way that you experience and talk about empathy, it's clearly rooted deeply in a sense of community.
Yes.
You know, a deep sense that you said that you didn't even think about empathy at the time, but
No.
you were fully in the community. And as a member, as an important member of the community, since you were also taking the paper and spreading the news and
Yeah.
them, so to speak, but also letting them feed you, which is it's a beautiful metaphor.
Well, that's how I really connected with you, Etiony.
Yeah.
That your story of your childhood and your
Mhm.
mother's giving and connecting to community,
Yeah.
I think we had a very similar childhood.
Yes. Yes.
And nobody ever paid any particular attention to me. Um, I was always loved. I mean, we had grandmothers living there, great uncles. We had a huge family. And it was really good because you never were too big for your boots, you know, that nobody thought they were special and they weren't. But everybody felt well loved. And there was always a lap when you were in trouble. So, you know, you got in trouble with your dad, you had a couple of grandmothers to choose from, and you had a great uncle and older brothers and sisters. So it was community in the family and a very sort of basic experience that, you know, you are one person out of billions in the world and you can make a difference where you landed. But you're no more important than anybody else. But you have chances because you have seen and you have lived where you haven't had to worry about being hungry. You haven't had to worry about where you're going to go after school. Do you have a home? You haven't had to worry, does anybody love me? But you do have to worry if you think you're a smarty pants or if you think you're better than somebody else, because then you would be very quickly taken down a peg. So I think that kind of upbringing, not being spoiled, coddled, or led to believe that you're smarter or more talented or more privileged than somebody else is really a good starting place
Well,
because you
let me. So you go. I'm sorry to interrupt. So you go
can.
from this foundation of a sense of community, connectedness, um, compassion, and love,
Mhm.
and uh, and then tell me then how you transform this into what's now an internationally acclaimed program called Roots of Empathy. So how do
Well, I guess it's the power of love because since I discovered that empathy really is cultivated in the first year of life between a mother and baby, that transcends any boundaries or borders that you want to put up in terms of class or religion or culture or language or geography, anything. It transcends it. So that I realized that if we bring in a parent and an infant from the community as a model of empathy to a classroom over the school year, we're not just helping children cultivate empathy, we are teaching teachers that in your community, which may be a very low socioeconomic community, you have gold. Because if you can bring in a parent from your modest community to be a teacher with their little baby, to help all of your students understand what it is to understand how another person feels and to be able to feel with them, you have given them a gift that will last their whole life. So for me, it was very joyful because teachers sometimes haven't had the opportunity to experience the lives that are lived by their children. What is a children's life like when they go home? And I mean, I saw this when I was a teacher. Um, it's no teacher's fault, but if you've lived a middle class life and you've never been in a home where there's maybe not any milk in the fridge and the only bread that's there is moldy and people don't know where the next meal is coming from, it's hard for you to have empathy for your students. And what I wanted to do was show the strength. So the whole Roots of Empathy program is centered around a tiny teacher who's a baby, 2 to 4 months old at the beginning of their entrance into the Roots of Empathy classroom. So that baby and parent are coached to become part of a classroom. And the way the program works, we train an instructor from the community. The instructor could sometimes be somebody, staff of the school, who's not an instructional staff. Very often, the guidance counselors, social workers, speech and language pathologists, librarians, support workers, but somebody from the school who has a real love of the children and the community and a knowledge. So we train whoever that is, or it could be a community volunteer. In a 4-day training, we coach them in how to use the curriculum. The program is a year-long curriculum, a year long, with 27 different visits. And the parent is selected from the community. And we connect the instructor to the classroom teacher, to the parent, and everybody comes together with this idea of how can we help these children become more empathic? Because we know that when they do, aggression and bullying and violence will come down, and social and emotional understanding and pro-social behavior, if you like, will come up and will stay up. So the circumstances of how the program happens, I mean, it's over 14 countries. It
Right.
happens in different languages. We have 4 different levels of curriculum. We don't offer the program beyond elementary school into high school because the children in high school have very fractured classes. They don't stay together as a group, and in many places, we don't offer it in middle school. If in middle school the children don't stay together as a group with predominantly one adult, because the power is the
Mhm.
teacher, even though the classroom teacher does not deliver the program,
Okay.
teachers are crucial to children. So we
Mhm.
want the teacher to see their children interacting with this baby and to see the 27 visits. There's only 9 with the baby, but there's 27 class visits. And they're all orchestrated to help the children develop their emotional literacy, to help them have opportunities to think about circumstances that will allow them to enhance their moral development. So in high school, it would be gorgeous to be able to do it, but it's not really structured in such a way that we could guarantee the outcomes that we guarantee in primary or elementary school. So that's kind of
So,
a snapshot.
it's in I know through conversations with you and through reading the many papers and reports that have been done about you
Mm,
and the impact of the Roots of Empathy program, that the benefits for the kids are just off the chart. This is remarkable. As
yeah.
you in pro-social behaviors, in reduction of aggression, and so on. And I was wondering, in terms, it sounds that another important target of intervention for you is the teacher and the school.
Yes.
So, what can you say about what embracing the Roots of Empathy program does for teachers and the schools?
Yes. Well, for teachers, and I'm a huge fan of teachers, I think there are heroes. And given the pandemic, oh my goodness, do we see how valuable teachers are?
Yeah.
Children literally long for their teacher. They long for the structure the teacher gives. They long for the way the teacher brings them together in solidarity. And I think the benefit for a classroom teacher is that you have 27 opportunities over the whole school year to witness your children being amazing, to see your children developing emotional literacy, learning about their own feelings and learning to talk about them and learning to understand how classmates feel and discussing issues depending on the age of the children, discussing issues that really you would love as a teacher to be able to bring up, but teachers have so many deliverables,
Right. Right. Right.
that they have to be accountable for what the children are understanding and able to demonstrate. So teachers find that as they learn more about their children, they also learn about their vulnerability and they learn about their possibility. The child who's pretty silent in a class may be nervous to speak up for any number of reasons, but it always comes out in roots of empathy. And the
Right.
one thing, because it's a very trusting, safe environment where children never laugh at one another or wouldn't dream of making fun of one another, because they realize we all have feelings, just like the baby has feelings, we all have those same feelings. So suddenly there's a real standard which we don't impose, but the children impose. So teachers have the opportunity to see how their class changes, that they're somehow easier to teach because they're not being mean to one another. They're not making fun of one another, that children who normally wouldn't speak up have the courage to speak up. So we know that there's a correlation between social emotional competence and academic performance. So teachers find that they can reach children who normally would be challenging to reach because the children are trusting now, that the children feel that the other kids have their back. And a teacher cannot legislate kindness, a teacher cannot impose civility. Teachers model it all the time and they talk about it. But when you have a baby and a parent come in and an instructor who's not you as a teacher, create a circumstance which is magical as the children sit around a green blanket and they're coached to observe how this tiny baby is feeling. And what is the baby's intention? Is a baby trying to roll over, and how frustrating is that? What can the baby see? How limiting is that? So the circumstances, it's kind of like a field trip on a green blanket that the teacher takes their children on. And because teachers often um, weigh in a little bit, um, we're just talking earlier today about how we asked teachers to share a time when they were little that they were bullied or somebody who they cared about was bullied. And when the teachers do share a time about when they were bullied, some of the students will cry. They're horrified that anyone would be mean to their beloved teacher, just like they're horrified that anybody would hurt their beloved baby. So teachers adore having this program. Schools, well, if you're a school that has a Roots of Empathy program, a bulletin board goes up in your hallway, and it's the Roots of Empathy bulletin board. And it weighs in with the birth picture of the baby and the birth weight. And then when the baby comes, the baby's 2 to 4 months old, and then they weigh and measure the baby, and then that goes up. And then there are pictures that go up every subsequent month. And then there's news that goes up about the baby. And then there's the children write letters to the baby, explaining things to the baby, asking the baby questions, and then answering for the baby. So there's amazing things that the whole school hears. And one of the things that I find particularly adorable, that principals will invite the Roots of Empathy family to assemblies. And the family shows up and the baby wears the Roots of Empathy uniform, the t-shirt, and there's a standing ovation. The parent becomes a hero in the community. That's our baby. That's our baby's
Yeah.
mother. And it brings a humanity and a warmth and love to the school that allows everybody to be a little bit a part of it.
Yeah.
So schools, even though they may only have one program, usually principals like to have a grade band, so that if it's, say, if it's grade 2 has the program, or grade 4, all the kids in grade 2 would have the program, or all the kids in grade 4, because it's really equitable to do it that way. But they'd have different babies. And it's not a competition, but you will hear children in the playground saying, our baby got its first teeth last week. And you will say, well, our baby learned to crawl. And but it's pride, and it's a beautiful, warm thing for a school to do, to embrace a family and to say that we are learning from the love in this family.
It's amazing. It's an extraordinary affirmation of humanity, too.
Hmm.
It's,
Hmm.
and we aspired, those of us who have been teachers,
Mm.
aspired to be able to lead and help promote that sense, deep sense of humanity in the students and in the classrooms that we lead. But what you're talking about is really at a whole different level. This is what is it seems like a very authentic affirmation of humanity. Yeah, they only need to show up and be part of the process.
I love that. They only need to
Yeah.
show up. And that's true. In life, if
Mhm.
showing up is half of it, and showing up with empathy is the other half.
That's
Because,
good.
yeah, because you can connect. And I so agree with you that community,
Yeah,
and I mean, however we define community, but
yeah.
community is so essential. And, the work that I was able to do in South Africa with the Nelson Mandela Foundation,
Uh-huh.
they and this is a long time ago, late 90s, when you talk about community, they bring community to a whole other level.
Mhm.
And it's so beautifully humbling. And I think wherever you go, and I'm so looking forward to coming to Miami to be with you, because I don't know your community, and you are enriched by the Hispanic culture. And my goodness, I don't even know the language. So I am really looking forward to an education through the food, through the stories, through the language, all aspects of the culture. That there is a joyfulness. There is a. I mean, I have visited. I spoke a couple of times in Miami, and I didn't attend any of the evening sessions they had planned.
Great.
They were all very lofty, but I thought, how many times am I going to be here, and what can I learn? So I played hooky,
Uh-huh.
and I asked one of the servers from the breakfast, okay, have you got a friend or someone who could take me around and let me understand how fun your place is, where's the best street food and all that kind of thing. And so I had 2 evenings on my own, AWOL, and had such a sense of warmth and vitality. Now, I know everywhere there's problems, but
Yeah.
my goodness, if you have the ability to connect as a community, together you can solve problems. And quite honestly, that's my biggest excitement to coming to work with you. Clearly, your institute and Roots of Empathy are mind and heart partners, but you are there in Miami, and I think where you're located is the kindling for a lot of good things to happen. And I just love to be part of it.
Well, we are so excited to have had the fortune and to find each other in our journeys through life, and then now through with the support of the Children's Trust to be able
Yes,
to bring the Roots of Empathy program to our
yes.
schools. So we are. This is really, really an exciting. One of the most exciting things I've done at this stage of my life, and I've done
Oh.
a lot of exciting things. And there's
Well,
one.
I've heard a lot of your exciting things
Yeah.
too, and have been very taken by the fact that, you know, I'm very impressed by your authenticity and by what you have achieved in your institute. But it's really exciting to see how others in very high levels have
Mhm.
also been taken with your impact in community and sought your advice. And, you know, you mentioned David Lawrence's
Yes,
organization.
yes, yes.
And I think it's about maybe 6 years ago that I first met Dave Lawrence,
Mhm.
and we had lunch together. And it was this very event that I played hooky on in the evening, but he and I had lunch in between the sessions. And I was so very taken with his vision
Yes,
for the rights, the entitlement, and the possibilities of
yes.
young children in Miami. So, for many reasons, bringing Roots of Empathy through you to Miami with the support of Dave Lawrence is the full picture of a dream.
Well, he's, as you know, he's one of our esteemed honorary board members, and he'll be very happy to know that you gave him some good words of praise here, and I'll let him know too. I wanted to tell you, you know, when you come in, and this is interesting. You mentioned um, the the important presence of the Latino community
Mhm,
in Miami, which is, you are correct. We are,
mhm.
uh, and one thing that I think for many people outside of Miami, they don't necessarily have been exposed to, is that actually Miami is more of a mosaic of ethnic mosaic
Mhm.
that of which the group that gets the most press, in a sense, the Latino group, in part because we make the most noise, and
Yeah.
we and but also it has to do with the economics of it. Is that who has really the ability to develop economically and own
Mhm,
parts of town. Uh, but they are really extraordinary. The African American community, the Black community here
mhm,
in Miami, is
mhm,
um, is extraordinarily strong.
mhm,
A very important part of the life of Miami, and I'm looking forward to uh, to have the Root of Empathy program in schools that serve predominantly Black kids and African American kids in our communities, as well as we have a very vibrant Haitian community,
ah,
and which I also think has a. There are different points in their journey as an ethnic
mhm,
in our city,
mhm,
but likewise they are really extraordinary, resourceful, uh,
mhm,
very community driven,
mhm.
um, deeply involved in promoting the welfare of each other.
Mhm.
Basics that I see very, very good for the program, for the Roots of Empathy program. So I'm looking forward to kind of like extending it to those two. As you once told me, your plan is to take it to every school. Uh,
Not
we're gonna
tomorrow, but
yeah, not too much. We're
but
gonna start with three.
absolutely. But you see, here again, we have a shared value of diversity.
Mhm.
So, pretty well in Canada, where I am, I mean, we're all over the world, but where I live, I should say, um, as compared to the United States, which is more of a beautiful melting pot of cultures and histories and aspirations. In Canada, we're more compartmentalized in that we're mosaics. You did use the word mosaic, but
Mhm.
what's typical in Canada, and we have huge immigration in Canada, and it's always been a value of our government
Mhm.
from since when I've been a child. So, but typically what happens is you have pockets of
Mhm.
cultures, so that we have our Vietnamese community. We
Yes.
have, so you see in the schools,
Mhm.
there would be a proliferation of Vietnamese children.
Yeah.
So in my earlier work with the parenting centers, you could see who was in the community because they showed up to this free program where
Yeah.
you can meet and let your children play with the people who live in the community, and you can get sort of advice from other parents, etc. So when we start in a community, we we look for a family who represents one of the minorities.
Mhm, mhm,
so that that family can be a centerpiece in the classroom.
mhm,
And what children learn by having either an instructor who represents one of the groups or a parent and a baby,
mhm,
you learn that, particularly from the parent and the baby, that there's no one right way to love,
mhm.
that we all love our babies in unique ways, but in universal ways. So that we would sing the welcome song to the baby in what other language the mother speaks. The children will learn it. The children will learn the lullaby of the mother from whatever language the mother speaks.
Mhm.
So that it's a real respecting and including of the contribution of the language and the culture of the mother. And in Canada, where um, we pay a lot of attention through Roots of Empathy to our Indigenous peoples because colonization has done a lot of damage to them historically. So we sing songs in 7 Indigenous languages,
Oh,
meaning
wow.
that we respect what's important to the family, who is our example of empathy. Um, so it's really, I mean, I'm so looking forward to hearing and learning about all of these, communities that you've mentioned
Yeah.
that are very present. They may not be the dominant one,
Mhm.
but Roots of Empathy has huge values of diversity and inclusion. And
I'm really, really thrilled. I think it's the thrilled to have the opportunity to do it. Thrilled because I am convinced that this is an important, that your program, that the Roots of Empathy program, is an important piece on the on our, what we hope that will become a plan for violence
Mhm.
prevention, um, for the whole city. And
Wow.
there are different components of this.
Mhm.
Uh, and frankly, not until our friend Zach brought me your
Oh,
book,
yeah.
I had not thought immediately about the empathy piece as a piece that I had not. And I was like, do you need to see this? But I said, no, no, it's phenomenal. It's one piece that I think, along with other things that we're putting in place, the active bystandership work, the anti-bullying trainings, our efforts also in human trafficking. And so
Yeah.
there are a number of things that I think, at the table, that we are hoping to thread together as we move forward, uh, to this next phase of the pandemic and beyond. I mean, um, I think, for the benefit of the folks who are listening to us too, we started the officially our year to develop the program and implement it here in Miami, and we're at the initial stage now of identifying schools that we can work with,
Yeah.
uh, identifying suitable individuals that we could train and help become
Mhm.
instructors as part of the program. And,
Mhm.
and we'll be working very hard for the next few months and getting everybody ready to do that, so that we can come the fall semester in earnest, then implement the program in at least 3 schools in our region. So hopefully we'll touch in each of those communities as we mentioned, just so we have a sample of them. And again, it's fantastic. I know that everybody in our staff is really, when we finish a conversation with your staff, every time we're like, wow, we're really doing this, you know?
Well, we're really excited about doing it. And, people might say to you, well, how come you're only starting with 3 schools? This is a program that's
Mhm.
well established, 25 years old, just like you are. Your
Yes.
organization is
Right,
25
right,
years old. We know how to do this, but there is no place exactly like Miami.
right.
So we listen very hard and we're eyes wide open because we want to be able to adapt to whatever we learn before we scale it bigger.
Yeah.
So this will be a year of being still and listening and learning. And then we'll come back, boom.
Boom.
And
Right.
then we'll go wherever you want us to go.
Fantastic. And also, just for the benefit of the audience, we will have a link at the bottom. this mysterious bottom of these videos. There'll be a link so they can learn more about the program, also learn about our funded initiative with the Children Trust. And if people are interested in reaching out to us and learning more about how they can collaborate, or then also so they have contact information and you know, get to engage us in that process. Mary, I am delighted again to and honored to have you in our lives and to have had the opportunity to talk to you today, introduce you to our community here in Miami, and very, very much looking forward to a wonderful experience here together. And I think it's going to be, as we talked about in a previous conversation, this is going to be for years to come. I think we'll be partnered for a long time.
We'll be joined at the hip.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for the very warm welcome, Etiony. And I can't wait to get on the ground there. Thank you.